So our next distinguished speakers will be Jordan Treakle from the National Family Farm Coalition, who will be focusing on land loss, land grab, and land access policy work from the National Family Farm Coalition. Also, Margaret Krome-Lukens from the Rural Advancement Foundation International, RAFI USA, who will be focusing on credit access marker bill, also known as Title V of the Farm Bill. If anyone else needs to do any shuffling or get water from the back, please feel free. But without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Jordan and Margaret. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Let me get my timer set up here. My name is Jordan Treakle. I work for the National Family Farm Coalition. NFFC is an alliance of 33 farmer and community-based groups across the country, representing the rights and interests of independent family farmers, ranchers, and fishermen in Washington, D.C. since 1986. Our diverse membership is bound by a common belief that communities have the right to determine how their food is grown and harvested, that everyone in the food system should have fair prices and wages, they should have equitable access to credit, land, and markets, and that public policy should support sustainable farming, ranching, and fishing practices. Countering extractive corporate power in our food system is a central part of NFFC's work and informs all of our Farm Bill priorities. And part of the reason we focus on countering corporate power is because we have seen how corporations marginalize the rights and interests of all small and mid-scale farmers, but farmers from historically underserved communities in particular. So today I'd like to just focus on one of those Farm Bill priorities, which is land governance. And you might be picking up on a theme here of the Federation talking about heirs property work and National Young Farmers Coalition working on land access. And we are all working together as partners on this issue of land governance. And the piece that I want to add to that story is talking about corporate land ownership. So I'd like to talk about a new bill, yet to be introduced, but well on its way, called the Farmland for Farmers Act, which we've been working on with our members, attorneys at the Vermont Law School, and Senator Booker's office to scale back corporate land ownership through federal policy. And for those of you who heard me speak a couple days ago on this issue, we'll hear some common themes. So to provide a little bit of background on how we got here, I think everyone in this room agrees that farmland ownership is as a foundational source of wealth, power, and sustainability in rural America. And we heard April say that earlier today, right? Land is the basis of competitive and diversified rural economies. It's critical for farmer autonomy and independent businesses, and it's critical for and in more practical terms, owning farmland is needed for collateral, for accessing farm loans, and Margaret's going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. It's important for investing in sustainable production practices like building healthy soils. And for most farmers, it's their retirement package as they are ending their careers. But for the past decades now, farmers in NFFC across the country have witnessed how corporations, both domestic and foreign, have been increasingly buying up farmland in rural America as a speculative asset. These corporate farmland investors are not about growing food for people. It's an investment model for harvesting profit by extracting value from the land through rents and leases, land value appreciation, and the financial safety net provided by USDA programs that are meant for working farmers but are too often benefiting large-scale corporations. So corporate control of farmland is a capture of the land's capacity to generate wealth and prosperity for working people. And these impacts are also felt at the community level. This is evidenced by research showing that farmland that has been increasingly consolidated under corporate ownership is linked to rural communities being negatively impacted through loss of agricultural employment, long-run depopulation in rural areas, and the degradation of crucial social and public infrastructure like schools, hospitals, and banks, as well as regional poverty and inequality indicators these are all negative symptoms of this corporate land ownership and consolidation trend. And for those of you who are here from these rural communities, this is not new news. The data is there. So the stakes are high for rural America, with 400 million acres of U.S. farmland, or 40% of U.S. agricultural land, expected to transition in the next decade or so as farmers age out of the sector. The time is now for policy action to keep farmland in farmers' hands. So, corporate farmland ownership is not new. More than a dozen states have anti-corporate farming laws on the books. They've been under attack, but they've been there for more than a century. But the scale of corporate farmland investment and farmland consolidation has increased significantly just in the last 2 decades. For example, the number of institutionally owned properties rose threefold from 2009 to 2022, while their market value increased from under $2 billion to over $14 billion in that same period. U.S. pension funds, in particular, have been heavy agricultural land investors, with subsidiaries of the Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association, or TIA, alone owning more than 336,000 acres in the U.S. In addition to U.S. corporations, foreign entities are also complicit in this trend. According to USDA, offshore entities, most of which are corporations, held an interest in approximately 40 million acres of U.S. farmland in 2021, or 3.1% of all private ag land. This is an increase of more than 10 million acres over 10 years and double the acreage held by offshore entities in 2004. Of the farmland involving non-U.S. interests, the majority, or 62%, is linked to entities that are from Canada and the European Union. So what does this mean for the future of farming? And we heard a little bit about this from David. We're seeing this flood of corporate money into U.S. farmland, and this buy-up is undermining local control. It's exacerbating land consolidation, and it's also contributing to farmland prices reaching historically high levels not seen since the 1970s. Farmland prices nationally have nearly doubled since 2005, with the average U.S. farmland value increasing 7% from June 2020 to June 2021, and 12% from June 2021 to June 2022. As farmland prices reach these historic levels, land access is the single most challenge facing new entry farmers and historically underserved producers in particular, again echoing National Young Farmers. And I would ask the folks in this room, how many aspiring young farmers do you know that can outbid a multinational corporation for access to land? So why should Congress take action on this issue now? As corporations increasingly buy up rural America, U.S. federal land regulations have not kept pace. While bipartisan concern about corporate consolidation have been raised since the 1970s, no meaningful federal policy reforms to address these issues have been passed into law since 1978. Meanwhile, access to publicly guaranteed agricultural credit and federal subsidy programs are increasingly allowing these corporate entities to gain an economic advantage over independent family-scale farmers in land markets. So we believe Congress has a responsibility to address these issues in the 2023 Farm Bill, which is why we're working again with Vermont Law School and Senator Booker's office to help craft a legislative proposal that would allow Congress to take a long overdue step towards addressing this national issue. So to briefly talk about the components of this bill, and it's actually pretty straightforward. The Farmland for Farmers Act would foster some meaningful action through a couple key steps. First, the act would bolster state authority to regulate corporations, both domestic and foreign, involved in farmland ownership. So this is a point about strengthening local control. And I should emphasize that the rest of these provisions I'm about to lay out are all inspired by existing state law. So this bill is not about recreating the policy wheel, but it's about building on existing law and creating a national standard so that states, rather than getting pitted against each other on how they govern farmland investments, rather have a common reference point or floor to work from. So secondly, the act would restrict corporations, pension funds, and investment funds from purchasing or leasing agricultural land. These types of corporations would be allowed to continue owning farmland they already own, but they would not have access to USDA or Farm Credit System programs and benefits, which are currently being used to underwrite and de-risk these corporate speculative investments. The bill would also restrict multi-layered subsidiaries from purchasing or leasing land. And this point is really important because it's these shell companies that are being used to hide who are the corporations buying up land and to mask the pretty predatory leasing practices that are targeting farmers in crisis, particularly in communities of color. So I'm going to skip ahead slightly because I'm running out of time. But the third piece of this bill is introducing some important exceptions, right? So corporations with 25 or fewer shareholders or members who are actively engaged in farming would not be impacted by this bill. So families with land and a family corporation who are involved in the operations of their land would be able to keep doing that. Also, cooperatives, nonprofit organizations, public institutions for higher education, and farmland used for research would also be exempt. And this is, again, all building off of existing state law. And finally, the act would authorize civil and criminal penalties on corporate entities that violate these farmland ownership restrictions. So if you break the law, you would be held accountable. So just to wrap up here, after working with many legal experts who have examined these issues at the state level for a long time, we believe this bill would be most effective in targeting Wall Street investors, private equity, and multinational corporations, and to transition speculative capital out of the agriculture sector while exempting most family farmers, including those small family corporate structures who can demonstrate that they are actually working the land. And we think this is going to go a long way towards relieving some of the mounting pressure on land markets and land prices, and support states in grappling with this trend. But this kind of policy needs and deserves bipartisan support, and we should remember that these kinds of guardrails on corporations and agriculture have had bipartisan support in the past. So we welcome all the farming groups in this room to work with us on getting this as a priority into the Farm Bill. And for the staffers in the room, we'd really like to work with you in Senator Booker's office to get this introduced and build support for it in the weeks and months to come. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me all right? Oh, yes. Hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret Krome-Lukens. I'm the Policy Director at RAFI USA, also known as the Rural Advancement Foundation International USA. We challenge the root causes of unjust food systems, supporting and advocating for economically, racially, and ecologically just farm communities. We're based in North Carolina, and we work with farmers across the Southeast United States, including the U.S. Caribbean territories, and across the nation. Our programs help farmers fight corporate consolidation, access USDA programs, expand to new markets, connect with faith communities, breed regionally adapted seeds, and navigate financial crisis. Much of that work happens through or focuses on our Farmers of Color network. We combine on-the-ground practical services and policy advocacy to ensure farmers have access to the tools they need to make the right choices for their farms and families, as well as for their communities and the environment. We have, similarly to April, a long policy platform, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to tell you the sort of broad themes of it, but you can go to rafiusa.org/farm bill for all the exciting details. The four sort of general themes of that platform include reversing corporate consolidation, urgent and equitable action on climate change, building local and regional food system infrastructure, and the fourth one that I'm going to really dive in on today, in particular on one bill, is ensuring that all farmers get a fair shot. We know that all farmers have not been given a fair shot in several ways. We know about USDA's history of racial discrimination, the impacts of which are very much felt today and have yet to be adequately addressed. And additionally, most USDA programs are built for large-scale agriculture. Small-scale farmers, beginning farmers, and farmers producing less common products or pursuing innovative marketing strategies have a really difficult time accessing those programs and resources. So one of our top priorities for this Farm Bill is called the Fair Credit for Farmers Act. It is based on the belief that all farmers deserve fair treatment at the Farm Service Agency. This hasn't always been the case, but with this bill, we're seeking a fundamental shift in the dynamic between farmers and FSA to a relationship where farmers have protections and can be co-equal partners with FSA staff in seeking farm success. With our partners at the National Family Farm Coalition, we have worked with Senator Gillibrand's office and her staff to write a bill that we think is huge progress towards this goal, and we want to thank them for their commitment and time for this cause. So I mentioned previously that all of our policy work comes from the work we do directly with farmers, and the Fair Credit for Farmers Act emerges directly from our work in our farm advocacy program. Now, the word advocate can mean many different things. In our farm advocacy program, it means that we assist farmers who are in financial distress with expert, in-depth technical assistance to navigate their financial options and find a way through tough times. This work often involves helping farmers access FSA credit. We help family farms of all types and descriptions, and our lead farm advocate, Benny Bunting, has helped and many times saved hundreds of farms over decades of that work. When Benny sits down at a farmer's kitchen table or walks into an FSA office with them, he gets a close-up view of the ways that our current laws and regulations, and in particular the way that they are implemented by agency staff, can either help or hinder farms. So the Fair Credit for Farmers Act emerges from those experiences, and I want to give you a sense of why this bill matters by first sharing some of those farmers' stories with you. In these stories, one of the main themes you'll hear is agency staff seeking ways to either deny or delay farmers from getting the benefits they're seeking. While we also have stories to tell of supportive agency staff, a principle that has emerged in our work is that the places for staff discretion are also the places that we find discrimination in the process. And we believe that farmers' experiences at the agency, and by correlation, their financial situation as well, shouldn't be dependent on the goals of the person sitting in the administrator's office or the attitude of the person sitting in the county office. We are seeking improvements at FSA that will result in a better and more fair experience for farmers in all future administrations. I'll also note that while we have changed the names of the farmers in these stories to protect their privacy, these are their actual stories, albeit a very small and limited window into them and into their years of struggle and endurance. So, to start, Stephanie Roberts and her husband are beginning farmers raising vegetables, herbs, eggs, and flowers on their farm. They applied to FSA for a $30,000 microloan to help supply all the little things that it takes to get your product grown, harvested, and to market. Hand tools, wheelbarrows, seeds, deer fencing, coolers, etc. They were told that since they weren't buying a tractor or something big that the agency could take back, that nothing could be considered as collateral, and they would have to put up their home as collateral. The agent said they probably wouldn't want to do that and risk losing their house. And when Stephanie asked for recommendations for other ways to fund startup, they were advised to pull their application completely and told to just shoestring it along or apply for personal credit cards. Over-collateralization is one of the main mechanisms of discrimination that we see, by which the agency can either discourage a farmer from applying in the first place or put a farm's assets and often home unnecessarily at risk. Bill Jenkins was a black farmer who wanted to start a fish operation on land passed down through his family. He was approved for FSA loans for a little over $100,000. Bill spent half the loan and began building his facility when his loan got changed to a new office. The new office notified him that his loan was not sufficiently collateralized, and they de-obligated the unspent part of the loan. Basically said, never mind, you're not getting the rest of what you were approved for. The record shows that Bill had done nothing wrong, but at this point he had spent $50,000, and his unfinished facility and equipment couldn't generate income without being completed with the remainder of the loan he had been approved for. He then found himself in a position where he was supposed to pay back that $50,000 with money he was never given the opportunity to make. Eventually, the agency accelerated his loan, which is when they say, never mind the original payment schedule, your entire principal is due back now, and if you can't pay it back, we'll foreclose on you. FSA's moratorium on adverse actions during the pandemic took Bill's situation from urgent crisis to prolonged limbo. Luckily, when Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, including Section 22006 with funds for farmers in financial distress, Bill qualified and was a beneficiary of those funds. But that single event debt relief from Congress is the only reason that Bill did not lose his family land from a circumstance that was created entirely by agency error and mismanagement. While Bill thankfully is still on his land, he's no longer farming, and the time and money he lost in the process have not been replaced, nor is there a way to repair the prolonged stress that he had to endure in the ordeal. A write-down is an option for debt forgiveness for FSA borrowers in financial distress with 3 qualifications. The farmer has to be in distress due to circumstances out of their control. They must have acted in good faith, and the write-down must be in the best interests of the agency. This was the case for brothers Anthony and Franklin Nolan, white beginning farmers, when hurricane-driven winds and flooding brought disaster to their vegetable farm, and they agreed to a write-down in mediation on the assurances of the FSA agent that it wouldn't impact their future eligibility. Unfortunately, neither they nor the agent realized that he didn't have the authority to make that commitment. U.S. Code forbids FSA from making loans to farmers who've had write-downs. Skipping several years, a lot of hard work, and more bad luck, last year we helped Franklin's wife, Rose, assume responsibility for the farming operation, in large part because Franklin and Anthony were no longer eligible for FSA loans. And we helped her get her first FSA operating loan. This year, she went back for her second annual operating loan. After prolonged back and forth and delay with the loan officer, the day Rose went in to close on the loan, she was told that in order to attain the 150% collateralization, which many agents believe is the standard minimum, she would have to include her home as collateral. Out of time to do the paperwork, needed to present other options to FSA, Rose signed on the dotted line. The Nolans are still on their land, and they are still farming, but now the worries that keep them up at night include the possibility of losing their home if bad luck comes knocking again. If a farmer feels their FSA loan has been denied erroneously, they can apply to the National Appeals Division. Anytime a farmer winds up needing to appeal their loan denial or adverse decision to the National Appeals Division, you can basically guarantee that they are going to miss the growing season for which they were applying for the loan. The appeals process usually takes at least 3.5 months and often longer. And in some cases, the agency intentionally puts the farmer through multiple appeals processes by coming up with new reasons to deny the farmer that weren't debated in the original appeal. I have another story here that I'm going to skip for the sake of time, but know that we have many, many stories of farmers who went through a first appeal and may have prevailed, and the agency came back with another reason that they knew about from the beginning. There's currently no good mechanism to compensate farmers who have lost a season through agency denials or delay tactics. So I wish I had time to tell you more stories. We have many more, But the overall point that I would like to make again is that farmers deserve fairness when they go into an FSA office to apply for a loan or to restructure existing debt when they've hit hard times. With the Fair Credit for Farmers Act, the goal is a shift in the dynamic between farmers and FSA to a relationship where farmers have protections and can be co-equal partners with FSA staff in seeking farm success. We have a section-by-section handout available for this bill, so I'm going to let that be your reference for all the detailed provisions, but I'll highlight a few here. The act would limit over-collateralization on farm loans and protect farmers' homes. It stipulates a maximum of 100% collateralization of FSA loans, with farmers' homes only allowed as the very last option for collateral, and it ensures that farmers can get their homes removed from collateral once they've paid down enough of the loan so that their homes are no longer required to get to that 100% collateralization. For farmers who are in delinquency, this bill adds protection against FSA taking all of their assets as collateral, the exact provision which put Bill's entire farm so unfairly in jeopardy. The act also restores eligibility for farmers who have had write-downs. Given the circumstances which must be in place for them to have gotten the write-down in the first place, and given how many farmers we know who wound up in financial distress in the first place from the repeated delays, denials, and appeals from the agency, we believe this is a fair way to restore access to credit to farmers who have acted in good faith. The act requires FSA to list all potential reasons for a denial in their initial decision letter to a farmer. If the farmer wins an appeal on the first reason for denial, there's no reason to have to go through another appeals process for an issue the agency knew about from the beginning. For farmers with an annual adjusted gross income below $300,000, it also changes the burden of proof in an appeal from the farmer to the agency. Farmers are usually not lawyers or experts on detailed regulations, and they shouldn't have to be in order to have a fair chance at prevailing in an appeal. The act expands the scope of how equitable relief can be used. Given the very real and sometimes devastating consequences of losing a season through an appeals process, we believe the farmer should be due financial compensation when the farmer was impacted because of agency error. Without going into too much more detail, this act also eliminates the current limit on the number of years a farmer can be eligible for an FSA loan, adds debt refinancing as an eligible purpose for an FSA loan, enacts a targeted 2-year interest-free deferral on direct loan payments, and waives guarantee loan fees for historically underserved farmers and ranchers for 2 years. I very much appreciate your time and attention today. Happy to take questions or talk afterwards. And if we have any staffers in the audience, you are also welcome to contact Senator Gillibrand's office for more information on the bill. Thank you.